Good morning and welcome to today's top business tech webinar on intelligent automation, overcoming the challenges to maintain the competitive edge. Intelligent automation defines the competitive edge that many companies strive to implement to stay ahead. However, while the value of intelligent automation is heralded by IT leaders as a critical solution in addressing the skills gap, reducing labor costs and increasing productivity, there is still a wealth of challenges that it poses. In addition to new cybersecurity threats, many questions revolve around the lack of skilled workers and the need for reskilling and the general apprehension felt by human workers and consumers. This in mind, I would now like to welcome my panel of experts who will provide us with insights into the benefits and challenges surrounding intelligent automation and how enterprises can successfully work it into roadmaps to maintain a competitive edge. First up, we have John Holdsworth, co-founder and CEO of Tortona. John is a serial entrepreneur with a consistent track record of identifying emerging trends, often in disruptive sectors, building pioneering companies and leading them to profitability and acquisition. John is one of the most respected tech visionaries and entrepreneurs in the SA tech industry. John started out as a COBOL computer programmer working on IBM mainframes and, over a 20-year career, performed many roles in the IT industry, including computer programming, systems analysis and design, project management, and IT consulting. Welcome, John.
Everybody.
Next up, we have Ivana Bartoletti, Global Chief Privacy Officer of Wipro and co-founder of the Women Leading in AI Network. Ivana is an internationally recognized thought leader in the field of privacy data protection and responsible technology. She has many years of experience working for large organizations in privacy policy, strategy, and programs related to digital transformation, cloud, and automation. The Cybersecurity Awards named her Woman of the Year 2019. As a visiting policy fellow at the University of Oxford, her research focuses on how to advance the global sharing of information in the context of privacy, security, data protection, and human rights. Welcome, Ivana.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to this.
We are also joined by Professor Alison Wakefield, co-director of the Cybersecurity and Criminology Centre at the University of West London. Alison previously taught at the University of Portsmouth, the University of South Wales in Sydney, City University London, and the University of Leicester. In addition to this, she worked for PricewaterhouseCoopers as a consultant following her PhD at the University of Cambridge. Alongside her research interests, Alison is a specialist in doctoral distance learning and security education. Alison's recent honours and awards include being named one of SC Media UK's 30 Women of Influence in Cybersecurity 2021, winning, alongside her co-authors, the Emerald Outstanding Paper 2018 Award for the paper Confronting the Fraud Bottleneck in the Journal of Criminological Research, Policy and Practice, ranking third in the IFSEC Global Top 50 Most Influential People in Security and Fire 2020, and winning the Association of Security Consultants Imbert Association's Prize 2017 for her contribution to the security profession. Welcome, Alison.
Thank you, and thank you for the very full overview.
And last but not least, we have Lebo Tabela, Manager of Robotics and Intelligent Automation at Deloitte UK. Lebo is a robotics and intelligent automation delivery lead at Deloitte UK. She has 7 years of work experience helping clients in various industries deliver in operation excellence and digital transformation projects. She was awarded an Outstanding Achievement Award outside Deloitte by Deloitte Ireland. She is the executive board member of the Future Comprehensive School, the school which is based in the deep rural areas of Limpopo, with a vision of providing quality education centered around technology to those talented youngsters who cannot afford to go to private school. Welcome, Lebo.
Thank you so much, Eva. Hi, everyone. Looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you, and welcome to everyone. Now, let's kick it off with the good stuff. Lebo, to start with you, in your opinion, what are some of the problems facing 21st century businesses, and how can the application of AI and automation help them face these problems?
Thank you for that question, Amber. A couple of things that come in mind. I'll just mention 4 of the problems that are common. Obviously, each business have its own tailored, problems. But I think maintaining their competitive advantage and keeping their customers satisfied. Businesses, I think they're under enormous pressure to keep up with the needs of the generation living in the digital era. We are the generation that requires personalized services to be delivered to us in real time. I mean, just now. That forces like businesses to sort of improve their operation effectiveness and also improve their process efficiencies. Additionally, it actually forces businesses or pushes businesses to think out of the box, come up with innovative products or tap into the new markets for them to maintain their competitive advantage or meet our demands or their customer demands. The second thing that comes into mind is I think the businesses do appreciate that for them to achieve all what I just mentioned, they need to leverage the capabilities of the emerging technologies, right? However, the biggest challenge that they have is then how do they make their operating models flexible enough to ease the adoption of the forever changing technologies, because it's not just a checklist whereby you implemented this and you're done. There's always something new that is actually coming, quite interesting, that you can leverage on. So making the operating models more flexible for them, to ease the adoption of these new technologies. Based on the survey that we've done last year at Deloitte, it has been some 8%, I think approximately 8% confirmed of the 58 respondents confirmed that they actually managed to scale, meaning it shows how much some of the organizations are still struggling to sort of scale when they are adopting these emerging technologies. Third thing that comes in mind is they're actually also faced with the challenge of the skill sets, like looking at their current workforce. They still have the gaps or the limitation in the skill set for them to support the implementation or adoption of these new technologies. Lastly, one of the challenges that they're actually facing is keeping up with the compliance of the regulatory requirements, given the environmental risks and the cyber risks that we are exposed to generally. Looking at the pandemic that happened last year as one of the environmental risks examples that definitely they do pop up. So they need to comply with the regulatory requirements that are there. So those are the 4 key common challenges that I think the businesses are really are faced with in the 21st century. And what I think, as you asked, what they can do to leverage the application of the RPA or artificial intelligence, I think we need to acknowledge firstly that RPA or artificial intelligence is not the solution for every problems that the businesses are facing. However, what we've seen is what we've sort of witnessed in the past a couple of years is there's been proven that those organizations that are literally leveraging this intelligent automation they have managed to transform their business processes, and as a result achieving speed and driving that efficiency. And then the businesses, the organizations that have actually combined RPA with AI capabilities such as machine learning, natural learning processing, natural learning generation, and etc. They've actually managed to automate the predictions, meaning, as I mentioned earlier, that we require personalized sort of services or products. So with this machine learning, natural language processing, they're able to know that Lebo might need this kind of products, or Ivana might need this kind of products in the near future. So as a result, they're able to tailor those services according to what we need. And again, referring to the survey that we've done at Deloitte last year, it has been like 68% of respondents. I think we had like 441 executives responding to that survey, have confirmed that they've actually used the intelligent automation to respond to the impact of the COVID-19, literally to keep their lives on. That's helping them to maintain their competitive advantage, as I mentioned. And then also the 3%, 38% of those respondents as well has mentioned that they've actually seen a 9% average increase in their revenue generation by just leveraging intelligent automation, which is the combination of AI and RPA. And those who are not actually combining RPA with AI yet, only seeing 3% average in their revenue increase. So there's actually multiple examples that I can give around how literally organization can leverage AI to to accelerate or achieve their goals thereof, Amber.
Well, this takes us very nicely on to my question for John. John, how has Tortona AI made use of AI to automate tasks that have traditionally involved just humans?
Yeah, I mean, I think building on from what Lebo has said, combining robotic process automation together with AI is where the real benefits are going to be gained in the future. Tortona's developed an AI-powered claim adjuster bot that thinks and acts like an experienced insurance professional. So that claim adjuster bot uses a combination of AI technologies, including natural language processing, natural language understanding, and machine learning, and understands claims like a human adjuster. Typically a human adjuster can take anywhere from 5, to 10 years to actually master, adjudicating claims. And, we're able to decide these claims in real time with very high levels of accuracy, which actually surpass human performance. In order to do that, the bot has distilled, hundreds of claim adjusters' work experience across a number of lines of business, and it consistently adjusts the standard each time. So what you'll find in the workplace is where you've got humans, you're going to get a variance of decisions. That's just the nature of humans adjudicating these claims. But if you're using bots and you're using AI, you can get that level of consistency. They adjust the standard, each time. The claim adjuster bots is trained on tens of thousands of historical claims, and the algorithms learn from experience, by analyzing, a wide variety of different, examples. So we specifically use that claim adjuster bot to perform policy coverage analysis. In that regard, insurance policies typically consist of multiple documents and policy forms. So a single policy can contain up to 25 policy forms, with hundreds of clauses and thousands of clause combinations, depending on the circumstances of the claim. And the forms are generally stored as physical PDF documents rather than machine or computer readable data, making them very difficult to analyze at claim time. So the challenge for, in insurance for end-to-end claims processing is automating policy coverage analysis, which, if you speak to anyone, will tell you is the foundation of, claim assessment. This is a complex task and has historically required an experienced claim adjuster to analyze the physical policy documents and, determine if there's coverage for the loss. We have managed to automate this task. In doing so, we do not take humans out of the loop. That's very important to say. We do all the heavy lifting and present a recommendation to the humans, for a decision. This is transformational, and I'll discuss a little later on, what the benefits are.
Mm-hmm.
Amber.
So, no, and not just at Tortona, but also in the wider industry, how would you say that AI and automation has overall helped productivity in the workplace?
Yes, substantially. I mean, I think if you look at that claim adjuster bot that I mentioned,
Yes.
The benefits are substantial. We reduce the elapsed time for deciding a claim from 2 or more days to 5 minutes for 80% of claims. Now, you can imagine, someone in the US, they've been subject to some natural disaster, that they're probably stood in 3 foot of water, and what they want to understand at that point in time, is their claim covered? Using AI, we can effectively decide that claim and give that claimant peace of mind literally in minutes, what could have taken days or weeks. Also, this technology can be used to cut loss adjuster expenses by as much as 50%, by automating all the multiple steps and handoffs traditionally required to finalize a claim. I mean, since the time taken to set the claim is directly proportional to its costs, reducing time delays obviously reduce costs and claims leakage. Mm. The other big benefit is increasing claims processing productivity by as much as 5-fold, by increasing the number of claims handled per desk adjuster each day. And finally, accelerating the speed of response, as I mentioned earlier, improves customer service and peace of mind for policyholders. Amber.
That's great. Thank you, John. And as Lebo said earlier, of course, there is so much AI and automation can do, but of course, we do still, at the end of the day, need skilled workers. Alison, how do you feel that companies should tackle the problem of having a lack of skilled workforce?
I was wondering actually if we could come back to that a little bit later.
Yes, of course, absolutely.
I'd like to just say a little bit more about the wider context.
Yes, please do.
So, I mean, these are issues about which we need to have conversations with people at all different levels. So I don't want to assume that the audience today just represents one level and level of knowledge. It's likely to be as diverse as any audience. And we're talking about a collection of transformations that affect the general public. They reflect all employees in an organization and people's specific roles and responsibilities. And these kind of issues aren't things that they'll just be dedicated teams and organizations to deal with. So the way I engage with some of these broad issues, I find the term the fourth industrial revolution really useful, because it serves as an umbrella concept for the era that we're entering into, and thinking about the collective impact of a whole range of major transformative technologies, and that includes the Internet of Things, and it will include quantum computing. All of these things are significantly impacting the ways in which humans live, work, and relate to each other, and reflect the continued blurring of the physical and digital worlds. So everyone needs to be prepared and have their level of understanding of these issues lifted, whatever level that they're coming in at. So I'd kind of like to unpick that as much as possible in this discussion before we then think about what does this mean. You may well be familiar with the concept of resilience that has gained a lot of currency in the new millennium, and particularly the last 10 years, and it's kind of permeated different areas of the delivery of the management of risk and security. And so one of the other ways where I'm coming into this is kind of from a security perspective. Resilience has become popular because it's a way of thinking that recognizes the complexity and interconnectedness of security challenges, and it advocates more holistic and systemic approaches to their mitigation. So you see it at national level, and in the UK through the work of the Cabinet Office and the Civil Contingencies Secretariat. It's a big area in international development now, with kind of combined solutions that combine both the international aid, but also building processes that will make communities more resilient for the future, and of course in organisations as well. And it has been described as kind of an antidote to the vast challenges of coping with and managing future uncertainty, and kind of providing frameworks for that. So even though the pandemic's not related to issues like AI and automation, it's a big complex challenge in the same way as many areas that we're facing. And one of the challenges of the future could be malicious or accidentally harmful use of AI. There are costs as well as benefits that need to be managed. I'd just like to point listeners to the work of the Centre for the Study of Existential Risk at the University of Cambridge. You might find it interesting to have a look at their website and publications there. And I think their work's helping to set the scene. In one of their ongoing projects, they do talk about the adaptations that needs to be made, whether we're talking about governments, intergovernmental engagement, or you can apply that to the corporate world, and indeed the work of individuals. So, some of the adaptations that we all need to be thinking about are things like having better modelling and analysis tools, and drawing on big and open data. Other things they mentioned in the report, more effective deliberative mechanisms that are collaborative and inclusive. So one example, again, kind of outside AI and automation, but if you think about issues of major weather related disasters, in somewhere like Australia that's very used to those kind of situations, then they're not necessarily drawing on the conservation knowledge of Indigenous communities, for example. And you have cases of people or governments building in areas that might be prone to bushfires, if it's Australia, or floods in the UK. So accessing a much wider range of knowledge to deal with complex threats and deliver complex solutions. There needs to be more transparency of approach within this kind of context, where again you're dealing with complexity, and that's to prevent information hoarding. So we don't know the realities of the source of the pandemic. We don't know the extent to which information hoarding may have taken place or may still be taking place, that then makes it difficult for us to respond to that pandemic. And that goes down to corporate level as well, and that increases accountability as well. An example there is nations' commitment to the Paris Agreement climate targets. Again, taking a kind of global challenge. You need adaptive policy responses and practice responses that enable continuous learning and adaptive system design. So there's not a linear pathway to dealing with both opportunities and challenges in a much more high-tech, fast-paced world. And we need to have ways of working that are adaptive as well. So, adaptive, collaborative, more analytic, more transparent. That's sort of those are the broader requirements, adjusted depending on, or for us as individuals or for our organisations or departments, adjusted according to where you are in that big picture.
That's great. So, and of course, we're talking about flexibility. What would you say, particularly for employees, what would you say is the number one way that you would ease any apprehension? Because
yeah, well, I think it's interesting as we progress in our own careers. The more knowledgeable you become, the more you know what you don't know. And I think that's always something that I would like to pass on to people early in their careers, about not to feel daunted or that they can't offer something, because as the world becomes more complicated, the contribution that we all make in that big picture becomes more important, and there are more specializations, etc., and lots of things that you can be trained to do. And one of the major shifts in professional development and learning, we're going from a full undergraduate degree is the most you can invest in your training and development, but we now have something called micro credentials. And so those are things like the short courses that you could do through platforms like FutureLearn, Coursera, or LinkedIn Learning. I think LinkedIn Learning is about £15 a month, and a lot of their little offerings are about an hour in length. And in the area of security, there's small modules and insider risk, social engineering, different dimensions of that, of the challenge in different areas of work, and so that learning is more accessible than ever, and you can learn an awful lot by spending no money or very little money in some of these areas of learning, and keep current and quite quickly show knowledge of an area through these bite-sized opportunities. So the challenge here is just helping people navigate through that and be aware of it. In the area of security, relating to the issues that we're talking about, in the UK there's a new cybersecurity council making career paths clearer and trying to address barriers to entry as well. That's something I'd like to come back to if we've got time. But
I do just see that John's just popped his hand up. Have you got something to add to that, John?
Yes, I think it's a really good question, and most employees do fear the impact of AI, on their jobs. That is a very real fear, and we encounter it in all of our implementations. I think it's incumbent on vendors, who are implementing this technology, to make it clear that the technology is not there to replace people's jobs, but to complement effectively what they do. Most good AI technology keeps humans in the loop. It simply changes the way they go about doing their jobs, removing all the boring, dull, repetitive work, allowing them to focus, on the strategic nature of their work, focus in on the decision-making process. But yes, it's a real fear, and it needs to be managed. But not too much of this AI is being implemented, excluding humans. There are generally humans in the loop, and that's how it should be implemented.
Lebo, do you have something as well to add?
Yeah, I normally give examples that, I think John has covered, a lot of what I wanted to say as part of getting this conversation. But I usually tell people that imagine going to university for 4 years, studying to be a chartered accountant or an engineer, and you get to the work environment and you spend over 60% of your time, manipulating data on Excel spreadsheet, moving data from one application to another. To me, that's a waste of intellectual sort of abilities. So why don't we take all these mundane tasks and give them to the machine and use the intellect that we have to actually do what we're supposed to be doing. As a chartered accountant, as an engineer, spend time designing solutions that will be of benefit to us. And I think that will enable companies to start coming up with more innovative products or tapping into new markets. And as a result, as the companies expand or grow, then there's more jobs growing. But they should actually look at it from that angle, that I spent 4 years, 5 years doing this master's, whatever degrees, and I come to a work environment and I spend time doing administration stuff. It's quite frustrating. And if you look at it in that angle, you realize how much benefit of an AI is rather than a threat. Across there.
And Ivana, if I can come to you now. Of course, there are so many great benefits of AI, and there are many ways to soothe employees who have concerns about automation, be it from an efficiency perspective or from a cybersecurity perspective. But do you feel that we're possibly at the risk of losing our common humanity as automation progresses and ultimately does begin to transform every single aspect of our lives? What sort of threats do you think we might see in the future?
Great, that's a really good question. I loved the discussions that we've been having so far, especially last bit on skills, and I think the real challenge will be around finding humanity in the age of the artificial, which I think is going to be a really fascinating task for everybody. And I also think that and this is going to be a task that is going to be necessarily having to involve a lot of people and coming from all different backgrounds to really understand what does it mean to be human in the age of AI, in the age of robotics, in the age of automation. What does it mean to be an employer, an employee? What does it mean to build innovation and transformation with employees? I work a lot on the data privacy impact assessment, and I really like when we adopt a more innovative and deliberative and participatory approach, for example, to data privacy impact assessment, where you involve communities, you can involve individuals, you can involve workers and employees in your digital transformation journeys, and you can define what a deliberative approach to innovation means. So this is a really interesting task, and I think within organizations it's imperative on all organizations to really try and understand how we make the digital transformation journey one that involves individuals and make them at the center, right in the center of what they're doing, rather than leaving that out. And I think this is the risk that we are incurring, actually, is the risk that we transform and we adopt a sort of techno-chauvinist approach, which is an approach that technology is necessarily better than non-technology. And it's not necessarily the case. It's really, sometimes AI may be the right solution, sometimes it may not be. Sometimes technology may be the right thing that we want to do, sometimes it may not be. And part of the considerations around whether we want to use AI or not, it also depends on how it affects individuals, how it affects people, how it affects employees, and also how it affects, let me say that loud and clear, those who are going to be impacted the most by a particular product. And I mean the most vulnerable. And I mean the people who have sometimes sit at the intersection of different discrimination, maybe gender, maybe race, maybe disability, maybe age. So I think it's really important to take this really inclusive approach. And I'm saying this because of one specific reason. I think we are at a crossroads at the moment, and I think this is happening all across the world. I'm seeing this as a sort of a leader in the privacy field when I can see that over 180 countries across the globe are enacting privacy laws. And when I talk about privacy laws, I don't just mean data protection and security. I also mean legislation that deals with impact on algorithmic decision making, that deals with what it means to be fair in the age of AI, what it means to be explainable, what are the limits, the strengths and opportunities of human oversight, which is really important, but is by no means a silver bullet. And what is the impact? What does it mean to be explainable? We are seeing at the moment courts, data protection authorities intervening on this matter. We're seeing courts saying, hang on a minute, if the algorithm is not transparent, then consent is not valid because the individual is not able to understand what the process means. We are seeing courts saying, hold on, this is not, and not necessarily data protection courts, tribunals and regulators basically saying, as it's been happening with Ola, with Deliveroo, and with others, basically saying, hey, if somebody is cancelling their shift to the very last minute, does not necessarily means that they are untrustworthy. It basically, sometimes it may mean that they have a child to look after, or they want to go on a strike, which is regulated and permitted in a lot of countries, for example, in the EU. So not all reasons are the same, and we have to be careful when we program, when we design these systems. We have to be careful that, you know, there is legislation that already applies to artificial intelligence in this system. So there is anti-discrimination law, there is privacy legislation, although all this sort of legislation has got limits to deal with the issues of it. But there is also an upcoming very strong demand for human-centered technology. And by this, I mean the EU, for example, with the Biden administration saying it clearly that we need a new Bill of Rights for individuals in the age of AI. The European AI Act, which is going to come into place in a few years, and you know, it's going to be, you know, difficult negotiations around it, but saying very clear that high-risk artificial intelligence needs a tough set of controls to ensure that it complies with the fundamental rights that individuals have. Look, for example, at Singapore and all the amazing work that has been wrapped around fair algorithms. Or look, for example, at what is happening in countries like Brazil with the data protection legislation, again, looking at algorithmic decision making. And organizations are equipping themselves with this kind of tools. We have a sort of an ethics by design approach in the things that we do, a platform for Ethica, but loads of organizations have this. The problem is that what is coming, and not just because legislations and regulators are there to implement the rules, to create new ones, but also because there is huge demand coming from people. And this demand coming from citizens and consumers has increased dramatically during COVID-19. And the reason why it has increased is because we have seen some amazing things from technology over the last 2 years and during the pandemic, like now that we can have this meeting on Zoom, but we've also seen technologies becoming tools of surveillance. And Alison, you know, in employment context, you know really well, you know, what it means, you know, the sort of the surveillance wrapped around employees. And we have seen technologies used to you know, brought in for one purpose, turning to something else. And over the last few years, just to name, you know, for example, some of the, and we are seeing now in the public debate, everybody's talking about what is happening to Facebook, and these issues have become mainstream. It's not just, you know, it's not just that. So there is a very strong demand coming from individuals, coming from regulators, coming from data protection authorities, coming from activists, coming from the Black Lives Matter movement, coming from, to say that clearly, you know, we want a human-centric approach to these technologies. It can't work if and so the real challenge for organizations is in how to ensure that, you know, in the pre-processing activity, the post-processing activity, the ongoing life of products when you go out in the wild and in the market, that, you know, we are making sure that all the controls are in place. And we're not seeing these controls as something that is going to hinder innovation. The opposite. We're seeing these controls as opportunities to create these innovations that people can trust, because when they can trust them, they're going to purchase them, they're going to use them. And this is how innovation and growth and wealth is then created.
That's fantastic and very, very powerful as well. Thank you. So we are just about coming to time, so I'm going to have to wrap it up very soon. But I was just wondering if, in closing, could each of you please just share your last bit of advice on how organizations can overcome all of these challenges, whether they're cybersecurity based or a skill shortage or struggling to scale up, and how companies can overcome these to maintain their competitive edge.
I'll be really quick, Amber, and I just want to build on what Ivana has said.
Yes, please.
At the end of the day, the organizations that design this technology They have to make absolutely sure that those algorithms are transparent. That's an incredibly important word. It can't be a black box. They also need to be explainable. When we make a decision or when we recommend a course of action around an insurance claim, that's an incredibly important event in somebody's life. It is incumbent on us to outline the reasons for those decisions, and we do. Computer can't say no and not explain. It absolutely has to give a sound rationale, and people should be able to object to that rationale if they elect to do so. And then the third and last point is you have to have humans in the loop. This technology cannot function without humans. Humans provide some critical skills that computers can't, i.e., empathy, question and answering, all those sorts of things. So effectively, just in summary, transparency, explainability, and humans in the loop. And if we get those things right, we're going to see major, transformations in how we go about, doing our daily lives without the controversy.
That's great. Lebo, you nodding along there, would you say that your sentiments are quite similar?
Absolutely. Take the humans on the journey. It's quite important to ease the journey of transformation. But in terms of just coming back to what I think businesses can do to accelerate their scale of adoption of RPO or AI, I think having the clear strategy or vision why you're doing it, just understand why you're doing it. Firstly, it's quite important. And be clear in terms of how you're going to capture your wins, your success, the value, how you're going to be capturing the value. That must be really clear. And I think also just taking a step back to, understand what are some of the barriers of, adopting this, which usually what we see commonly being process fragmentation, lack of IT support, and et cetera, et cetera. I think from a process fragmentation, nowadays we are seeing AI-powered tools such as process mining, really bringing in some factual insights to the organization for them to understand really what is happening on the ground as opposed to what they think is happening. And they can use those insights to literally start reimagining their processes. And that will help them understand which of the activities can be done by this robot or these machines, and which of those activities can be done by the human. And if this process are to be automated end to end, then how do they then repurpose the skills of the people who will be shifted from those processes, as I think Ivana and Alison has touched on. And lack of IT support, there's a lot of limitations in terms of the systems. Some of the organizations that we sometimes work with, we find that they have lots of legacy systems that don't even have APIs on them, like lots of firewalls and all that. So if they can literally, campaign for like IT support, it will also ease their, process of scaling. And then training, lots of training. It has a lot of shifting the mindset. That goes a long way. I think John has touched on that they need to definitely take people on the journey for them to understand this. All this is new to us, and we are born to resist this kind of change because it comes with fear. So educating us on the journey and taking us on the journey thus goes a long way. And lastly, I think there's also data. The organization have lots of data, but they don't know how to use it. They go about using it to make decision to accelerate, to speed up their decision making. So partnering with third-party organizations to help on the journey, it's not a bad thing at all. Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, that majority of this organization or businesses do lack the skill sets or there's gaps in terms of the skills that they have in their current workforce. So partnering with the reputable third organization that have been on the journey, trials does help or go in a long way. So that's my final thoughts on how they can actually accelerate their scale. Amber, thank you.
That's great. And I think this is a perfect time for Alison to come in. You've just mentioned the importance of training, which of course Alison touched on earlier. But Alison, please do share your final words with us. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, what I just wanted to touch on relates to diversity and why that is so important. So employers need to remove barriers to entry into their organisations and recruit the best candidates from the widest possible pool. So that includes different disciplines, and so some of those actions that I talked about earlier, adaptations that we need to make, those aren't technical issues. There are technical elements of those issues, but those are managerial and people and practice and structural issues. And there's room for people of all disciplines and backgrounds in that big picture. So, we need to get away from the idea that people that we're recruiting must go to university and do this or that degree, and then only then are they ready to come into our organisation. That there needs to be a lot more preparedness to train people on the job and just think a bit differently about routes into the organisation, and being able to reach a wider pool. In terms of social background, I think what employers and others really don't fully understand are the opportunity and attainment gaps that are what leads to lack of diversity in organisations. So I work in an urban university that serves mostly people from the London area who don't move away to university. They have commitments at home and come in from home, and we take some people in through clearing and from access courses, and we have level 3 courses as well, so just below university level as a route in, not the same sort of UCAS process always. And what's noticeable working with these students is they are no less bright than those that I've worked with in more elite institutions. What is noticeable really relates to background and poverty, and all the kind of opportunities and knowledge that people who haven't come from well-off family backgrounds and family backgrounds where people have been through university before and have to make it on their own and fund themselves. And so if you're cutting those people out of the process, if you're just recruiting at elite universities, for example, you're potentially losing access to the more resilient, the more adaptable, driven people who've overcome the most immense barriers to get to where they are, and are actually performing extremely well with so many more obstacles behind them. So where I work, we're very socially diverse compared to most universities, and just a very different profile. Most, I think about 99% of our undergraduates come from state schools. They an above average percentage come from more deprived areas, and there are all kinds of challenges that those kind of students overcome, and perform just as well, and arguably are more adaptable. So that is a big part of the solution to diversity initiatives, is understanding what's stopping the people getting through, and thinking about, are you looking in the right place? Because it's probably a case of reaching out to educational institutions at different levels and in particular areas where you will find these people.
That's great. So, and just with the very final words, Ivana, do you have anything to add?
I mean, I agree with a lot has been said. I just wanted to add a few things. So I loved what Lebo said, why you're doing it. I think this is really, really important, because I always say it's really important for organizations that what problems are you trying to solve, rather than be allured by sort of the first sort of flashy project or the first flashy product that you can find in the market. That is, and we are seeing at the moment a proliferation of toolings that, you know, that yes, I mean they look really interesting, you know, but they're not there to solve the biggest. You know, and so it's really, really important to focus on the question, what problem are you trying to solve? Not just to get a technology or AI just because there is a particular cool product that has been really marketed by PR departments, but because they're there to solve an issue. That's really, really important. The second thing, very briefly, is stop talking about trade-offs. I mean, this is really, really important. We've heard a lot over recent times, and there is a trade-off between health and privacy. There is a trade-off between security and privacy. There is something that people have got to give if we want to innovate. You know, we have to give some privacy if we want to innovate. Well, this is not true. We've got to change the mindset. How can we innovate, use AI, artificial intelligence, automation, in a way that actually safeguards and enhances the rights of individuals, not the other way around? And I have to say the companies that can do that, they are the ones that have a competitive edge, because the demand coming from people and legislators and regulators is really increasing around this. The other thing briefly is be open and transparent. You know, there are so many things that it's not just about the transparency of algorithms, that yes, it is important, but it's very much contextual. It depends, you know, it depends, you know. We have to really navigate this, but do this together with communities, together with organizations, together with others. What does it mean to be explainable? You know, that's something that needs to be navigated through. Explainability obviously is not the release of a code that only a few people can understand, but explainability is contextual. It depends on who you're dealing with. You know, if I'm a patient, I want to know that something works. I don't really care that much if how explainable it is. But if I am the doctor that operates in this environment, I need to know how the algorithm works, because I'm responsible for it, and I'm liable if I act upon it in a way which is not right. So really navigate to all this complexity, but not do it into closed doors. You know, I work as a counsellor and an advisor to project development, and these are issues that need a lot of navigating. They need a lot of talking through, involving, and the last thing, very last thing, a bit controversial, is to reward dissent. Alison was saying something really, really important about diversity in the team. Algorithms can be extremely discriminatory. They can perpetuate, hardwire the discriminations and the inequalities that we have in society right now. We've got to really encourage people across the business to spot these things and reward people who actually go there, and especially tech people who go there and they say, oh gosh, there is a problem here, rather than wait for a whistleblower to come out. Companies have got to have the courage to reward that approach. And if they do that, I think, you know, we are going to see really good stuff happening in this field.
Lebo, do you have anything to add to those final words?
Absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. I think it takes me back to my favorite quote by Stephen Hawking, that in the, you know, now that AI it's here, you know, if we're not careful, it can be the worst thing that has ever happened to us, or we have to choose whether we want to make it the worst thing or the best thing that ever happened to us. So we just have to be careful. I think Alison and Ivana have just summed it up for me, and I just had to mention that quote. It reminded me of the Stephen Hawking's quote.
Well, I think that's an absolutely excellent note to end on. I have no doubt that all of our viewers will agree. We could just keep discussing this for hours. I feel like we've barely started to scratch the surface. And I know that there is just so much more that each of you can share. But I'm afraid we are at time for today. So with that, I would love to thank all of our panel members today for joining us. I am sure you all agree that it has been insightful and informative. And I'm sure our viewers can take the information gained from today to implement it into their business. I have no doubt that quite possibly in the future we may end up doing a part 2 of this, as there is just so much to begin to dive into today. Top Business Tech will also be hosting its next webinar on the 30th of November around the evolution of critical communications. You can register today by visiting www.tbtech.co/events. Thank you, everybody, and have an excellent day.
Thank you.